Hi, Gabby.
Hi, AnneMarie.
Um, so when I look at the work you're doing through recovery, USLDH or hashtag USLDH, and this panel as a whole's other digital humanities work in the archives, what I see is a disruption to the colonial practices of institutional libraries and museums. This aspect for me of Latinx DH is an intervention against nationalism and colonialism of universities as institutions. The Latinx DH projects discussed by this panel resist. They demonstrated decolonial resistance to the university and specifically to the archive as colonizing spaces that keep Latinx communities outside their gates. These projects were conceived and continue to be developed to open the digital archives and digital spaces, even as these archives are being created, to the larger Latinx community, building and recovering histories, art, and culture. They resist scholarship practices that privilege those with R1 in those with access to R1 institutions over those without. Further, all of these projects resist the colonizing practices of institutional collecting and archiving as gatekeepers, limiting community access. These projects do this by working closely with communities and their institutions as partners, rather than treating them and their data as resources to be mined. Individuals and systems are met where they are, with projects that are shaped by these individuals and institutions' unique needs, rather than having them conform to the structures of our projects. We create our projects around them. In doing so, Latinx digital humanities archiving projects resist capitalist structures and the false equity of treating all institutions equally instead of recognizing their different levels of resources and access, their needs, and their historic missions. In this, Latinx DA, in this, Latinx DH recognizes that historically institutions like university libraries have not always been welcoming to Chicanx and Latinx peoples, even in cases where those people and those cultures are the subject and objects of discovery, of study. These projects, in their structure, implementation, and access, seek to heal harms done through the archive and museums to communities by fields such as anthropology, history, literary, and library arts. With this in mind, and shifting to your own work, when I heard we were going to be presenting together, I found myself thinking about two main questions. First, Arte Publico Press and the Recovery Project have been central to the development of Chicanx literature and Chicanx studies since the 1970s. In what way do you see Latinx digital humanities work you're doing now connecting with the organization's movement past? And the work you're doing as part of USLDH allows you to be involved with numerous emerging Latinx DH projects. And I'd love to hear about the trends you're seeing across our field.
Thank you, AnneMarie, for these ideas that you posit, these questions that you just give me to start to think about some of the work that we're doing with the U.S. Latino DH Center at the University of Houston that is founded on the work from the Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Program and through Arte Publico Press. And I titled my presentation Historical Reckoning and Social Justice, precisely because a lot of the work that we are doing really stems from the fact that we are, that this project, that this program, that started in the Arte Público itself, right, that starts in 1979 through Dr. Nicolás Canelos, who is founding his work on a social justice premise to make sure that Latinos and Chicanos and New Yorkers have a space, have a venue in which they can produce literary, artistic work, scholarship, right, that eventually becomes a foundation for U.S. Latino studies, right? So the Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Program, or the project itself, becomes the basis of an archival process that begins to try to establish a place where we are going to locate, preserve, and disseminate the written legacy of Latinos from the colonial period up until the 1980s. We're using some of this foundational work to launch the USLDH program, the USLDH, the Latino Studies and Digital Humanities, with Dr. Carolina Villarroel and myself, to create a physical space for the development, support, and training in DH projects, using the vast collection of materials at the Recovery to create opportunities and facilities for digital publication of Latino-based projects and scholarships, to promote and foster interdisciplinary scholarly work, as well as to provide a communal virtual space to share knowledge and projects related to Latina and Latino digital humanities, as well, with the end goal is to establish a Latino hub. Before I jump into that, I should mention that the materials that we are working from are pretty vast from, what is housed at the Recovery Program. We have, microfilm and located in microfilm, thousands of original books, manuscripts, ephemera in various languages, English, Spanish, French, and Ladino. We have approximately 1,400 historical newspapers, some microfilm and digitized images, photographs, an authority list, personal papers, databases. So, the amount of materials that we have is just so vast and powerful. I share a few of the images here with you of, a sample of some of those newspapers that we discussed. We believe that there's approximately 2,700 newspapers that were published in the U.S. in Spanish. We have a holdings of 1,400 of them at Arte Público Press and Recovery. And here's an example of what some of the acquisitions, right, in the work that we do in the post-custodial and in the whole process of digitizing these materials and making them accessible to scholars. So how does our DH program engage with these Anglo, phallocentric, and Eurocentric epistemologies? So our goal is to center ethnic materials by reading their archives and these primary resources within their historical and their socio-political context, to incorporate languages other than English, to create meaningful and respectful metadata in both English and Spanish, to enact the post-custodial praxis that we have been practicing since always, because there's been a situation where our communities have not felt that they have been well received within these archives. Work with the community as knowledge producers, not as objects of research, as our colleague Maria Cotera will discuss in her own presentation. Create knowledge and scholarship with and alongside community materials, models, and the people who are producing them, right? As well as engage the local communities as much as possible, whether it is as knowledge producers, but also as people who are enacting and working with some of these materials, and to provide and allow them to provide commentary on the way these materials are being presented. So here we are with a sample of some of the projects, some of the trends that I see in digital humanities. Of course, there's a lot of mapping of where our people were and layering these maps or laying these maps alongside traditional discourse, historical and literary discourses, so that we can demonstrate that our community has always been existing, has been there, has been participating. A lot of times they haven't been seen. We are also, using a lot of visualizations. For example, the Omeka exhibits that we have, such as the Entre Balas y Rugidos and the Ángela de Hoyos collections. We also see trends in Twitter bots, where we have our community interacting very actively in these spaces in social media, and also creating the example that we have with LULAC is a community project that we've also developed to create a timeline for LULAC and to show the impact that this community, that this organization has had in the community with undergraduate students, graduate students. We also, some of the work that I think that is important that is happening in digital humanities, and it's an important trend, is the creation of some of these bibliographies where we are really citing and referencing our own community, the voices, right, that really speak to the work that into the scholarship that really informs and centers the communities that we are serving. One of the things that I feel that we are very proud of that we did with Carolina and myself at the USLDH Center is to create this database of US Latinx and Southwestern DH projects so that we could show that we are working in community, that there are many digital historians, digital scholars throughout the US, that this is not new to us. We have been doing, just as you know, AnneMarie, we have many scholars who have been doing digital scholarship for a long time. And so this is not new to us. Now with this list that you see, it's up to 137, really showcases the breadth and scope of some of these projects that are happening across the US. One of the other latest things that we've done is we've partnered with Manifold to create open resources, open educational resources for our communities by producing and publishing some works that are easily accessible to students and at all levels and community at large. And so these are just some of the examples that USLDH and is partnering with and is doing to really extend the work of a project in a press such as Arte Público and Recovery, and to really extend us into the future, right? And to start populating these algorithms so that our youth will not grow up in a void, right? Thinking that their history does not matter, that they have not been active and full participants and citizens of this country and have been producing and participating just as anybody else. And so we invite you to visit our website and follow us. Thank you.
Hello, my name is AnneMarie Davalos, and I'm going to be speaking about Mexican American art since 1848, abbreviated MAAS 1848. And I'm part of the panel, A Look into Latinx Archival Praxis. According to cultural anthropologist Arlene Davila, our social hierarchies sanction ignorance about Mexican and Latinx art. The result is neglect in libraries, archives, and museums, and a lack of online access to Mexican American art, and with it, understanding of the nation's cultural heritage. Today's presentations is in two parts. First, I'll describe how you resolve the invisibility and the lack of access to Mexican American art through the creation of a post-custodial portal. And second, I document the challenges we encountered due to Eurocentric epistemologies that informed cataloging, metadata, and vocabularies. To address issues of invisibility and accessibility, we decided to build Mexican American art since 1848. This gateway provides visual access to Mexican American art and related documentation through virtual unification of geographically dispersed records. We envisioned a post-custodial portal to challenge the siloing, knowledge extraction, and stockpiling methods inherited from colonialism and Western approaches to archiving. The portal privileges epistemological frameworks, perspectives, worldviews of Mexican American communities through culturally informed descriptors that remediate Eurocentric coding, which obscure this art, history, and culture. In the first iteration, We harvest information from 3 open source compilers, the Digital Public Library of America, DPLA, Calisphere, the Portal to Texas History, and 2 museums, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, SAAM, and a documentary repository produced by the International Center for the Arts of the Americas, ICAA, at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. These collections allow for a variety of art and related records with emphasis on the Southwest, the traditional core of Mexican American communities, and with some attention to the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest. For the second iteration, we plan to digitize and virtually compile the nation's largest collections of Mexican American art and related documentation held by the National Hispanic Cultural Center in Albuquerque, Mexicarte Museum in Texas, and the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago. Part 2. We imagined that the digital realm would allow us to resist colonial tactics of extraction, resource stockpiling, exclusivity, and cultural appropriation. Although Mexican American art since 1848 does not remove materials or information from source communities, we actually rely on a database, a static set of records that are updated quarterly. Yes, the portal sends users back to the creators of records. That is, it's a post-custodial portal, but the static database feels like a betrayal of our vision because we must extract and stockpile records. We learned that even universities that value digital humanities do not support all projects equally. A static data set, rather than more active connections with the 5 sources, is a strategy of sustaining the portal with little staff. Similarly, metadata schema and controlled vocabularies forced us to reckon with the Eurocentric logics in the digital humanities that conflict with our goals to privilege Mexican American worldviews. When we set out to build Mexican American art since 1848, we envisioned a user-friendly portal for bilingual, Mexican heritage, and intersectional audiences. This inclusive vision is not the same as the 21st century neoliberal claim, all are welcome here. The phrase for status quo structures that privilege whiteness and heteropatriarchy while appearing to add new sources and perspectives and people. Rather, we built from the ground up a portal that centers Mexican American students, people of the borderlands, and multilingual users. The obstacles of invisibility and accessibility are more challenging to resolve because the tools we use further erase the cultural knowledge and wealth we wish to amplify. For example, we see conflicts between our vision and Eurocentric conventions for metadata and controlled vocabularies. Our qualitative research found that content experts use culturally informed nomenclature to locate, describe, and contextualize Mexican American art. One anecdote about piñata demonstrates the importance of culturally informed terms to improve discovery. Here's the story we tell. Piñata has long been a part of the English language lexicon, and many people know it as an object filled with treats that is deliberately broken to acquire the treats during a game in which participants are blindfolded and swing a bat or stick at the hanging piñata. However, standard cataloging consigns the object as vessel, thereby making it invisible to those unfamiliar with such cataloging vocabulary. And yet I wonder, what would the Metropolitan Museum of Art do if I swung a stick at their vessels? And it gets worse. Many museum cataloging systems use the Greek word amphora for jar, vase, or vessel, which further complicates the invisibility of the piñata. We want to describe a piñata as a piñata. And within the portal, we plan to enhance or reconcile the metadata used by conventional catalogers. Our enhancement will mitigate cultural erasure. However, funders, archivists, and librarians expect us to standardize definitions of cultural terms that we use or share. While a piñata is easily defined, concepts such as rascuache, ponquero, mestizaje, tortilla art, domesticana, and borderlands depend upon the intersections, the nuances, and the ambiguities illuminated by Chicana feminist theory, decolonial praxis, and critical ethnic studies. It's extremely difficult to select a single definition for these cultural concepts. Doing so requires us to disregard the feminist and decolonial theories that led to the challenge of Eurocentric epistemologies responsible for obscuring Mexican American art in the first place. Yet metadata registries and other open environments where we are encouraged to share our documentation require definitive statements about the cultural terms we have identified, and there's over 70 of them. In the end, we are delighted to have increased access to a rich array of artistic forms and related documents. Our portal illuminates how Mexican American artists simultaneously continue to lay claim to influences from Spain, Mexico, and the indigenous populations of North America, and they embrace the pre-modern, modern, and postmodern eras. In the words of Maria Cotera, co-creator of Chicana por Mi Raza Digital Memory Collective, we seek an unruly, diffuse, and rhizomatic network of thousands of interconnected records to resist a singular meta-narrative about Mexican American art, history, and cultures. We recognize that our larger initiative, called Rhizomes Mexican American Art since 1848, of which the portal is only one component, it challenges Eurocentric epistemologies, but digital tools are not neutral and will not dismantle the colonial foundations, even of our own work. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Maria Cotera, and I'm here to talk about the Chicana por Mi Raza Digital Memory Collective. So Chicana por Mi Raza is a collective of historians, educators, students, researchers, archivists, and technologists who are all dedicated to preserving imperiled Chicanx and Latinx histories of the long civil rights era. The project was launched in 2009 by me and Linda Garcia Merchant, who is now at the University of Houston. Marco Seiferli Valencia joined the project as our digital archivist in 2013. Like most archival recovery projects, CPMR emerged in response to a profound absence in our historical memory. As daughters of avowed Chicana feminists who published and organized throughout the 1970s and 1980s in both Chicano movement and women's movement spaces, Linda and I knew that there was a massive untapped reservoir of memory, both embodied and documentary, that was not being collected by institutional archives. As a consequence of this archival absence, scholars continued to leave women like our mothers out of the historiographic accounts of the movement years, which made it even less likely that their materials would be collected by major institutions. But we knew, because we lived in these women's homes, that there were massive collections of materials in their homes, and we suspected that there were collections like theirs across the United States. So we set out to interrupt this negative feedback loop by collecting oral histories and digitizing the personal archives of Chicanas in the Southwest and Midwest, tracing a vast archipelago of memory through our digital archiving work. Over the last decade, we've traveled with students, scanners, and video equipment to the homes of women who are active in the movement years, and we've conducted oral histories with them, digitizing as many archival documents as possible in the few days that we spend with them. Students, of course, have been central to the project. They scan and process digitized documents and video. They catalog and apply metadata to the materials we collect, and they upload these materials to Clouder, our login protected content management system, which is what I like to call the Chicana memory mothership. Students also create curations. They write biographies for our public website. They also write historical essays for the site in the Historias section, and they create visualizations like timelines and mapping projects. Since 2009, we've recorded hundreds of oral histories, amassed the largest digital collection of Chicana archives in the world with over 10,000 digital assets, launched partner projects in Wisconsin, Chicago, Houston, Minnesota, and New Mexico, curated 2 public exhibits, both in Detroit, and have developed critical resources for teaching, research, and project development. We've done all this without the assistance of any major library or national grant. We rely on a combination of my faculty research funds, small grants from the various universities I've been affiliated with, the University of Michigan and Texas, and server space from those institutions. We're now on the Texas Advanced Computing Cluster at the University of Texas. And of course, the project relies on plentiful student labor. Sometimes this labor is paid when we can get money to do so. Sometimes this labor happens through the strategic use of classes that I teach and that others teach. So CPMR's existence at the margins of digital humanities funding infrastructures reveals the persistent precarity of Chicana memory, even in the digital age. A precarity that I would argue is pretty much the constant state of marginalized archives everywhere, both digital and analog. But this precarity, far from being a deficit, has forced us to think about the archive in really generative ways. It's forced us to ask different questions of the archive, to interrogate what it is, where it is, and who it is. It has also pushed us to consider what it means to do digital humanities beyond the university and its related institutions. In and through this labor in the margins, we've developed a Chicanx digital memory praxis that is centered on the idea of memory keeping. Memory keeping is grounded in the many acts of remembering and information sharing that constitute, as Cindy Fierros and Dolores Delgado Bernal have argued, a Chicana epistemology that has been with us for generations, a way of knowing and transmitting knowledge. It frames our practice of digital recuperation as a collective endeavor in which multiple collaborators, students, scholars, the women we interview, have a shared responsibility for preserving and activating Chicana memory. It foregrounds relationships over digital tools, self-determination and autonomy over institutional visibility and funding, and capacity building over the development of expertise among a select few. Engaging a Rasquachi approach to digital collecting that creatively reuses existing tools and infrastructures of power to achieve these aims, it decenters the university as a site of knowledge power by building community knowledge hubs and distributed knowledge networks. Activated in and through our practices of oral history, archival collection, digitization, and historical interpretation, our digital memory praxis approaches the archive as both a site for the preservation of historical memory and a set of living relationships which do not end once the collection of data is done. Rather than a static repository waiting to be mined by properly credentialed scholars, we have conceived of the digital archive as an active space of encounter or encuentro, and a memory-keeping technology that allows us to build collectivities even as we build our collections. Through this digital archival praxis, we've come to understand that the archive is much more than just a collection of documents or digital artifacts. Indeed, the archive is us.